Attorney JJ Perez, very, very good to see you. And I really appreciate you being our guest speaker today at the Be Smart podcast. I'm not so smart. You are. That's why you are here. So, welcome.
What's up, my man Gil? Good to see you, brother. Happy to
see
be here.
Well, thank you for your time. I know you're a super busy man. We are now in August, the end of August, approaching September. So for all of our B-Law members and business law clients out there, we want to thank you for being members here at the firm. And every month we try to deliver great content for you. Today we'll be discussing Attorney Perez's great topic on estate planning and how that can be useful for business owners. So we'll be getting into that a little bit deeper into the podcast. Last month, we had B-Law member Levis Caicedo of Absolute Marketing. Did a great deep dive in terms of applying AI to a business for growth. And next month, on September the 30th, we're going to have Evelyn Perez Verdia, and she will be talking about applying public relations to your business to grow it. So with all that said, I always like to talk a little bit about the format that we have for today. So for the first maybe 15, 20 minutes, I want my audience to get to know Attorney JJ Perez. I know we're going to have some really great discussion. You and I go way back. So glad that after all these years, we've continued our relationship. And then after that, we will then get into the heart of estate planning as it applies to the business owner. So with all that said, Attorney Perez, I'm going to give you a softball question here. Or give us a quick background. First of all, where you came from, where you grew up, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, wow, where I came from, where I grew up. I didn't know we were going to go that far back. So, I was born in San Francisco, California, moved to New York within the first year of my life. Moved to Jersey, then moved to South Florida at the age of 9. So raised in South Florida. I don't claim the North anymore, but raised in South Florida, particularly in Broward County, where we've been ever since, right? We've lived there, been raised there, graduated high school there. After going up to UF, which obviously is where we met, go Gators, right? Okay. Doing undergrad there and then law school over there at UF. After that, then coming back to my roots, back to Broward County, where we currently live, where I currently practice, together with my wife of a long time now, 23 years, married this past year, 4 kids later. I love her more than I loved her the first day I said I do. So we're still kicking strong and doing well, and that's what we're doing, man.
Very good, very good. Wow, that was impressive. You went from California, New York to Florida. You covered the triangle with your parents in a short amount of time. So very cool. So
my parents were definitely in the hippie age, so they were all over the place, and they finally decided to settle down in South Florida. So,
so I always like to talk about high school a little bit. High school may or may not give kind of a preview into maybe where you are now. During that time when you're in South Florida, you're in high school, comparing now, you're an attorney, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're a pastor, which we'll get into that as well. Looking back during your high school years, what was kind of going through your head? What were you doing? Did you imagine that you would be here today?
So that's a funny question, because if we went back to middle school, I had a different answer. So I'll jump back anyway. But in high school, man, I'm going to be honest with you, if I may. And this sounds so bad, and I mean it in the most humble way. High school was really easy for me. So I was just focused on wrestling and catching up on my sleep during all of my classes. That was what my high school was pretty much about. I hate to say that, guys. Don't show this to your kids if they're watching the Be Smart chat. Don't let them see this video, right? That portion. But I will tell you this. If I go back to middle school, however, where I am today goes back to that point. I remember being literally, like if it was yesterday, being 12 years old, being at my parents' house. Obviously, it's where I was living. And I'm yelling from the second floor of my parents' house. I said, "Mom, I figured out what I want to do with my life." She's like, "Yeah, right." Like, what 12-year-old knows what they want to do with their life, right? I said, "Mom, I love to argue and I love to compete. I want to be a lawyer." And legitimately from that point on, wow. That was the trajectory. I was literally 12 years old, and from that point on, that's what I wanted to be and to do. And I wanted to be, some big time litigation attorney at one point. And although I've done litigation, now I'm almost exclusively focused on transactional. So that kind of got flipped upside on its head. But yeah, that's where I started back in middle school and high school.
Wow. Well, that's great insight, because I would say that probably you're in the minority in terms of people understanding very early on what they want to do. I would say that there are a lot of people who still haven't figured out, what they want to do, and that could shift. I'm very much diverse. I like doing different things, but the fact that you had that epiphany, early on, I think to a certain extent is very liberating, because you're very focused on what you do, right?
That's it, man. I knew what I wanted to do from that point on. So even in high school, the classes were geared towards that, right? Doing trial classes, mock trial classes in high school just for the fun of it, before even getting into undergrad or even law school, doing stuff like with the state attorney's office. So it was a pretty cool experience. But yeah, I would definitely agree that's the exception rather than the rule, for sure.
Yeah. So our target audience here are entrepreneurs, business owners, and I always like to dive into where did you get the entrepreneurship bug, or where did you figure out that you wanted to own a business? There's always usually, there's some really cool story behind that. So we've heard about, on one end, how professionally you wanted to be an attorney. And so you're obviously a business owner and entrepreneur now. So can you identify kind of around when you figured out that you wanted to own your own shop?
So when I wanted to own my own shop, or when I wanted to start a business, because I didn't ever really, I didn't initially want to be a law firm owner, so to speak, right? But I always wanted to be a businessman. So I can tell you where that started. I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. And I wanted to make money because I didn't have much. And so I wanted to sell, back in the day, we're dating ourselves maybe, but back in the day, there were those Hallmark cards, that the stationery. I didn't know what stationery meant, but I knew that if you sold it, you could make money off of it. So I ordered like these prepackaged stationery products, and I would knock on doors selling stationery at like 9, 10 years old. I got to 11 years of age, and I was like, you know what, this sucks. So I started, let me start a lawn business, right? My father had me cutting the lawn. I said, this is a useful skill. Let me put this to work. So me and my buddy around the block, we got our parents' lawnmowers, got our equipment together, and we would go knocking on doors and knocking on houses, and we started a lawn business at like 12 years of age. So there's always been that like entrepreneurial spirit, to go ahead and do stuff. So I think that just translated now. It's like, you started working for somebody when you get out of school. And I kind of quickly realized that either I'm going to be partner very quickly, or I'm going to just start my own thing. And just to kind of segue here, God was like, yeah, it's time to do your own thing. And that's what we did, man.
Wow, that's extraordinary. I kind of relate a little bit to that. I had a paper route when I was in West Virginia. So I did the paper route for about 8 months or so, and then see, what else did I do? Oh yeah, I sold some candies as well around the neighborhood. So definitely, we can relate on that early hustle.
Did you sell the bubble gum in high school?
No,
Young bubble gum? Oh,
no.
you're kidding me. You missed out on one of the best opportunities, 400% markups. You would go to Walmart, you buy a 4-pack or a 5-pack of the Bubble Yum bubble gum back in the day for $1. You go to school and you sell each one of the 4 of the 5-packs at $1, period. So you're making $4, $5 for each dollar you spent. That was the best one. That was my high school hustle. I won't get into the other hustles because I've turned that corner in my life, but there was a couple more within there.
So another interesting thing that you mentioned is sports. I relate to that as well. I've been playing tennis since I was 2 or 3 years old competitively, so it's always been a part of my life, and still to this day, and I pass it down to my kids as well. So you were a wrestler. Interesting. So give us a little bit more insight about that, how serious you were. And I think really, a really interesting question, and I want to hear how you have to answer, is that how did that dedication and that discipline that you built, or not, in wrestling kind of carry on, throughout your life?
Well, I'll tell people, and this is no disrespect to any sport that's out there, but if you've ever wrestled, you quickly find out that it is probably the hardest sport, if not one of the top 3 hardest sports that anybody can partake in, because it literally has to be a lifestyle, right? If you're going to succeed at it, it has to be a lifestyle. And it's like professional fighters. I mean, your diet matters more so than in other sports. Like if you don't eat well in another sport, maybe you have a bad day. If you don't eat well in wrestling, like you're just not competing, because you have to be on weight in certain weight classes, and the practices are 3 hours to 4 hours nonstop grinding. Every time you get on the mat or in the ring with somebody in a combat sport, they're literally trying to kill you. Like that's what you do. You practice killing each other every single day. So in that context, I've always told people, when you learn how to wrestle, Dan Gable, one of the most famous wrestlers, he said, once you've learned how to wrestle, or once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy, because it teaches you a grind. It teaches you a discipline, you getting up early. I remember my senior year, because I was a fairly high level wrestler in high school. And I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning running 5 to 7 miles. At lunch, I was jumping rope and skipping meals. After school, I was doing 3 hours of practice. And then at 10 o'clock every night, I'm back out running 5-7 miles a day. What's the point of that? The point is that it teaches you the grind. It teaches the respect for discipline, right? And how to stay locked in when you got to get something done. So to your point, how did that translate? I mean, now when I'm having a rough day, I'm just like, man, suck it up, man. Get it done. Like grind it out. Do what you've got to do. You sleep later, right? There'll be rest on Saturday if I'm lucky, right? But just get it done. And so that discipline is clearly translated to all aspects of my life nowadays.
That's great. That's great. I think one of the things that when Monica, my wife, was first pregnant, and as we had our kids, I always wanted to instill that discipline of sport, because of exactly what you're saying right now. So in tennis, though, there's no contact like it is in wrestling, unless you peg the other person with a tennis ball.
That's fun. Is that part of the objective?
Yeah, that's the fun part. You'll get called out, but it's all good. So now let's move on to now going into the University of Florida, and it's always interesting I always like to hear the stories as to, how did you pick the school, or how did you go about selecting a school and then making that decision, and then, finally going over there?
I'm going to feel really dumb on this one. And again, this is not the part you want to show like your kids, right? I just kind of ended up there, man. Like, like in all honesty, like I'm from South Florida. So like I was a Miami Hurricanes fan, right? And I applied through all of Florida and, kind of just got in. And I just, would this be I think at the time I know, just as it is today, the best school in Florida, right? But I wasn't paying too much mind to it. I just kind of did what I was supposed to do, did the SATs, did all the stuff, and just made applications and just let the cards fall where they lie. I didn't really become a Gator fan until I got there. So it's kind of, I hate to say this, it almost happened by accident.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I ended up there because my brother, so I have a point of reference. He went to dental school there. He's about 13 years older than I was. So when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 age, I'd be going up to Gainesville and visiting while he's in dental school. So that's how I was introduced, to the university. Well, thankfully that you ended up there. You and I would have never met. And during college, and I know this because, we were together there around this at the same time, literally. You were very involved. I mean, obviously you're balancing academics, you're balancing being involved, extracurricular type matters. For those 4 years, how were you kind of approaching school, understanding that law school is coming down the line pretty quickly for you? How did you approach those 4 years?
Yeah, same way, right? Just putting your head down and hitting the work. I mean, unfortunately, did a lot of partying. It was part of the college experience. Some I'm proud of, some I'm not proud of. But that was it. It was get the grind, do it. I was there for the number one reason was they never lost sight of that. I think that's the most important thing, right? I remember people in our first years that they went is to party and great kids, great students, and end up dropping out of the first, second semester because they just messed around, right? So although I did a lot of playing, had a lot of fun, so to speak. It was really just about making sure you didn't lose sight of number one. So just locking in and grinding forward. So what it was about, right? That's it.
And you were also a student leader, and that was a big part of your experience there. I kind of see, well, I can see why you were in leadership roles just based on what you mentioned in your upbringing, having that independence, knowing what you wanted, hustling with selling the cards. So, yeah, talk a little bit about your experience there as a student leader, which in essence kind of has some parallels to owning a business if you kind of look at some of the mechanics of it. So what was your experience at that time?
So I'm laughing because my response is not going to be the response you expected either. Like I kind of got into leadership on accident. I hate to say that. We were in I forget what it was. We were in so I was looking to join a fraternity at the time, right? And I ultimately ended up joining Lambda Theta Phi, which is a Latin fraternity up there, right? And in after having joined that fraternity, you get exposed. When you're in fraternity, you get exposed to different things. You're told to get involved in all this stuff, right? So they were having a Hispanic Heritage Month. That's probably the first time I think you and I met. They were having a Hispanic Heritage Month event, and they were looking for somebody to run a portion of it, to either be the director or assistant director. I forget what it was. Nobody stood up. I'm like, whatever, I'll do it. And it was literally that was how I started in leadership in college. I mean, there was always something in me to start stuff. I mean, I guess I say it's accident, but the reality is, when you raise your hand and say, here I am, that's in you, right? Not everybody raises their hand and says, here I am. So, but as I think about it, I really feel like I kind of just stumbled into a lot of this stuff. And then once you're in it, right? So you're in it, and now all of a sudden you're being involved. And we met up with the Hispanics, the HSA, right? The Hispanic Student Association. You were. I looked to you, man. You were the man. Like, you were running for student government. You were the lead of HSA. I was like, this guy over here, he's awesome. And then when we met, it was you brought me on to be the social director of the HSA. I'll never forget it. And it's after that, once your foot's in the door, we just kept doing it, and just that's how that leadership role, if you will, kind of planned out for me. I say by accident, but I did raise my hand, so I guess it was intentional at the end of the day.
That's right. Well, you definitely have to continue. And one thing that I don't know if you even remember this. I'm sure you do, but you are also a member of Florida Blue Key from your leadership experiences. And for the audience who's out there, Florida Blue Key is like the premier leadership organization at the University of Florida. It's been around probably for 80, 90 years. Pretty much all the governors and senators and all the major politicians, judges, everybody who was at UF, if you became a Florida Blue Key, it was a big deal. And to get in is extraordinarily difficult. And so you were one of those members that recognized your leadership.
Yeah, I got denied the first time I applied. So I wasn't good enough the first time. And I'm sure it was the interview that messed it up. I remember it was like, yeah, I'm not going to go into the interview, but it's a really bad interview. It was just one of those not peak moments, right? I really was not prepared for the interview, but yeah, man, it's one of those things like when you get into leadership, I love it because it forces you. If you want to be there, it forced you to be involved in other organizations, right? It wasn't just if you were one leader of one organization, you had to basically be president or vice president, treasurer, secretary of like multiple organizations, right? And then still, outshine others in interviews. So yeah, it's a great organization, and proud to be part of it.
Well, and we'll move on after I mention this, but right now, U.S. Senator Ashley Moody for Florida, she's a Florida Blue Key member as well, and she was also president of Florida Blue Key. Obviously, she's a Republican. On the Democrat side, Nikki Fried, who was student body president at the University of Florida during our time, and an attorney as well. And she was the agricultural commissioner here in Florida, which is a statewide elected position, the first Democrat elected statewide in like over 20 plus years. So she was also a Florida Blue Key member as well. So the organization has definitely produced a lot of leaders such as yourself who are doing great things. So then let's now barrel into law school. So let's talk about that. You're finally there after being 12. What a great story. Now you're there. Man, what was it like? Was it everything that you expected? Was it different? How was that experience?
I had no idea what was going on. Absolutely no idea. And I'm dead serious. Why? To go back to the original stories, I slept all through high school. It was easy. College, it was easy. And now all of a sudden I get to law school and everybody's smart. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do now? So I had to figure out really quickly the hard way that I wasn't going to be able to coast through it. So literally, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And by point of reference, right? You know, you said you had your brother who was there ahead of school, ahead of time, right? I was the first in my family, not to go to higher education, but certainly the first in my family to pursue like a professional degree like law school, right? I don't have doctors in my family at the time, and I was the first in my immediate family or in my general family to do that. So I literally had no north. I had no idea what to expect. I had nobody telling me, hey, be ready for this, be ready for that. I had stumbled into certain things over my life. And then I get to law school and I'm like, all right, I'm here. And I'm like, oh no, I'm here. Like, now what? And that's literally how it went. And so after the first semester, yeah, you know, and you know law school, and if you're watching this and you're not familiar with it, you know, they typically will grade on a curve, right? So a lot of people are going to be right around that average, and then you're going to have a very few people on that high end and another few people on the low end of the grading curve. And I was smack in the middle. I had never been smack in the middle in anything in my entire life. So it was a reckoning. It was a like, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do? And so I had to figure some stuff out. I mean, I was going to pass, but I wasn't going to pass with the marks that I was looking to pass with. So we're there, and yeah, it was. I don't want to say a culture shock, but to the extent that an educational experience could be a culture shock, my culture was shocked to the core.
So you had mentioned when you were 12 that you were thinking about not only law school, but being a litigator. So while you were in law school, did you further that interest in terms of taking classes that involve litigation, or did you kind of take a different route?
No, that's all I was doing, right? I was on the trial team. I didn't really do what was the, oh gosh, I can't even remember the other one, which was the appellate briefs and stuff like that. I forget what that team was, but I was on the trial team since early on. So we were competing nationally, you know, on behalf of UF. We were representing UF. We were traveling the nation, competing and doing that often. So that was incredible. I mean, the best grade I got in law school, which, as you know, is the book award, right? When you're the top of your class, you get what's called the book award for any class, was the trial team. So like when you say, was I on that? I was on that point. Like, that's what I was doing. And it wasn't until after I got done with my first year of law school. In that summer, after the first year, they had a program at UF where you can go and you would be paired up with one of the board of governors for the University of Florida College of Law. And at that time, George Moritas Sr., George Moritas Jr., by the way, who's a former, you know, U.S. representative. He was on the House of Representatives. I think he's running against now, again, as well now to get back into Congress. That's his son. He was there the same years that we were there as well. I don't know if you remember him. But George Moritas Jr., so his father has been in South Florida since like the 50s practicing law. And so I went there over that summer. It was a paid internship, clerkship, and they did real estate, estate planning, and business type matters. And so that was kind of like my first exposure to that. I had always been interested in real estate. So I remember being like 14 in high school and watching those late night, like, buy your properties with like HUD, you know, like how to buy your first properties with HUD, and those late night infomercials always interested me. So I went, and it was a real estate business and estate planning firm. And I learned a lot there. And that kind of was my first exposure really into the financial world of things, right? One thing is to try a case, litigate, present, and do that. Another thing is to understand business and understand the flow of capital, because I didn't come from a house of entrepreneurs. Both parents, blue collar workers, for the most part. And so I had never had that exposure. You know, I remember the first time somebody closed a real estate deal, and back then it was a $200,000 condo on the beach that same thing probably goes for $2 million now. But back then it was a $200,000 closing, and they closed what we would call all cash, right? With no loan financing. And I was like, what? People have $200,000 in cash? Like, what world am I been living in? Because I didn't know people had bank accounts with that kind of money. You know what I mean? I thought my parents were rich with $20,000 in the bank account. So that kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of that world. And then so that was just interesting, and just kind of stayed that course, stayed on the trial path until after. As a matter of fact, once I got out of law school, I went to do criminal defense work, because I was going to go work for state attorneys to, do the typical gain the litigation experience and then jump out and be an incredible litigator in any field of litigation. So I started, instead of going with the state, because I didn't want to commit to them for the 3 years, ended up with a private defense firm, and quickly realized that criminal defense was not for me. And then I went back to that law firm that I clerked with, and the rest is history.
So then you started up your firm right around what year?
2007.
2007. Wow. And ever since, you haven't looked back.
Haven't looked back. I mean, I've peeked back, thought about it, but no, never looked back fully.
And so, now we're going to start shifting over to, the main topic for today. And before we get to that point, kind of walk us through what you were doing in the early stages of having your own law firm at that point. Now you're a practicing attorney, you own your own business, which happens to be a law firm. What practice areas are you involved at that point in time? And then lead us now into the evolution of the area of estate planning.
Yeah. So when I first went off on my own, because I was in that firm that did real estate business and estate planning, I had learned everything that I could learn in the season that I was there. They offered me a partnership. And as I said earlier, I'm a big proponent of God leading and directing my steps, right? And so in that season, they had offered me partnership, and I told them I'm going to pray on it. I went back, prayed on it, and got an answer that it was time for me to launch my own thing. So that's when I started my own firm back in 2007. We started in real estate. Primarily, that was the main bread and butter, doing title closings, both commercial real estate, all of that. But if you recall, 2007 was the start of something very interesting nationwide, right? So when I went off on my own, I had 5 real estate files on my desk, and I thought I was really cool. I would take each file and spread them over my desk to pretend like I was really busy, because I really wasn't busy. I was broke with a lot of time on my hands, right? So I had 5 files when I started off, and obviously started to grow the business from there. But shortly thereafter, within a year, in 2008, boom, all of a sudden the mortgage crisis happens, right? And the real estate bubble bursts, and everything is going crazy. So I'm like, and I kid you not, here's my conversation in my prayer time. I'm like, God, like, you're funny. Like, why did you launch me now to start my own firm in real estate and then decide to crash the world market in real estate? Like, it didn't make sense to me, right? So we were doing closings and purchases, and then we quickly had to transition back to the litigation experience. We had to start doing a lot of the foreclosure defenses and loan workouts and modifications. And, that was cool, because we were able to help a lot of people out for a long time. And having a heart coming from ministry, right? We hadn't talked about that yet, but having a heart from the ministry, I was able to help a lot of people while also sustaining the firm. Like, if it wasn't because we started doing that, yeah, I would have looked hardcore backwards and got into another firm, like gone somewhere else. But we were fortunate enough to shift gears in that season. Like any good business person's got to do, you have to learn when to shift gears. You can't be so stuck in one thing, because what might be working for you today is now obsolete tomorrow. Like with the whole AI conversation you had the last month. Like, if you're not doing AI now, you're sleeping on it. Like, you're going to be quickly eliminated from the market if you are not incorporating AI into your business. And so we shifted, and we survived. We outlasted, like a good Survivor episode. We outlasted, we outwitted, and we outplayed, and we survived that time frame. And we got back into the real estate. And once we were back into the real estate and the business world, we started adding more of the estate planning, with a lot of it being the wills and the basic care stuff that people need, until several years back where I was like, the will's just not enough. And then that's when we started really getting heavy into the trusts and the proper estate planning that really most people need, but don't know that they need. And so that's been the journey of this last season. Like the last several years have really been really intentional, keeping doing what we're good at, which is the real estate and the business. That's not changing, but that runs itself. But really developing and being intentional from a business perspective on the estate planning side, because and we're getting to this now, right? But my experience is that I'm sure this is everybody's experience, right? You don't know what you don't know. You might think you know some stuff, but you don't know what you don't know. And when you start expanding your mind and start seeing, oh, there's that out there and this out there, I could use some of that. That's what it was for the estate planning. So I pride myself in really educating people as to why they need estate planning, one, and why they likely need a trust, number two, as opposed to what everybody thinks they need, which is a will.
No, that's great, and we're going to dive right into that. And I have this conversation a lot with business clients. We'll be meeting and talking, and they'll tell me, "Oh, I need a trust, or I need a will, or I need to protect my business assets because I have this lawsuit, that's been filed." Or so there's a lot of general, people understand. Well, they know the word trust, but in the end, legally speaking, they don't understand the different, like, what is it, a revocable trust, is it an irrevocable trust, and what are the kind of the effects of having each one of those. So let's start with that part first. If you could provide an explanation to the audience, generally speaking, what is a trust in Florida, and then if you could then dive into the different types of trusts. And so that way everybody kind of starts off on the same page with your explanation, and then we can start diving into the importance of these trusts and how business owners can really benefit from it.
Sure. So let me start off by where everybody might be, right? So a trust itself is primarily what we would call an estate planning vehicle. Okay, it's something to plan your estate. What does that mean? It means the stuff that you have when you're gone, right? Whatever you have when you die, that's your estate, okay? Or while you're living, the stuff that you've accumulated is your estate. So I know we're talking to business owners here, right? So you're working all your life and you're developing these assets and you're developing and earning money, and hopefully you're putting some of that away or a lot of that away. Hopefully you're buying properties and storing up assets. You're developing what we would call your net worth, right? Your net worth is a good way of thinking about your estate. So as a business owner, you have all these assets that you've worked so hard to gain. And now you need to look at it and say, okay, if something were to happen to me, what's going to happen with these assets? If I'm mentally checked out for sickness, illness, accident, or something, what's going to happen to my assets? Or when I die, what's going to happen to my assets? Is it going to go where it's supposed to go? And so when we think about that, there's really three things that people can do. First, they can do nothing, okay? They can trust the state and our government to make the right decisions. How many of us would know that's not usually the best option, okay? So secondly, we can do with a will. Everybody's familiar with a will, and that says when I die, I want my stuff to go this way and that way, period, okay? There's a problem with both of that, and that is that both of those have to go to the court system. And unless they really, really like making other attorneys that they don't know rich, that's not a good look either, because they're spending and wasting money unnecessarily as opposed to giving that money to their kids or to their loved ones, their spouses, etc. So the third option now is the trust, okay? And as you said, there's a couple levels of the trust. But the trust itself, if we think of it as a bucket, right, where we put all of our assets into the bucket, we handle that bucket for our lifetime. The second we can't handle it because maybe mentally we're checked out, we have somebody who takes over that bucket and now runs it for the benefit of us and our loved ones. And then when I die or when the person dies, it gets handed over to whoever the next person is in line to make sure that everything, all those assets get transferred to their loved ones to take care of them after life, right? So it takes care of people in life and after life. Whereas the will or doing nothing is really just an afterlife decision, right? So when we go back to the trust, it's literally a vehicle through which, or a way in which we handle our stuff, to put it in very layman's terms. Okay. We handle our stuff. Now, there's two types of trust. You mentioned both of them, right? You have, and I guess, big picture trust. You have the revocable trust and the irrevocable trust. Irrevocable or irrevocable. That's the fancy way of saying it. I'm sorry. I'm not that fancy, Gil. Sorry. You're the irrevocable. I'm not irrevocable. I just say irrevocable, which, but either way, however you pronounce it, tomato, doesn't matter, right? But the reality is that if it's irrevocable means you can't change it. Like, you can't amend it. Once you said it, it's set in stone, which becomes a way to protect assets to a degree because it's no longer yours. You've transferred the beneficial ownership to somebody else. The downside is you've transferred your stuff to somebody else. Okay. So unless you just have tons of money left over that you are not needing to use regularly, that's usually not the best option. The other option then would be the revocable trust or the revocable trust. That revocable trust means you can change it, you can amend it, you can clean it up, you can add to it, you could take away from it, you can do whatever you need with it. And that's usually the better recommendation because I don't know about you, Gil, but I can't predict the future. I don't know what my life has in store. Understand? And so I can't say for certain today that all my assets and all my things are going to go a certain way. I can pray and I can believe and I'm trusting in God's greater plan. And I'm trusting that I'm going to have a lot of years on this earth. But what if I don't? Right? I need to be able to put stuff in play that I can move and in a good sense of the word, manipulate, right? If I need to take it back or use it. And that is one of the benefits of the revocable trust. It allows you to still have control over your stuff while you're living. And that stuff will take care of you while you're living. And then if you pass on, it will now remain to take care of your loved ones and the people you leave named in that trust. So it's all around just a good vehicle. I know I said a lot, but it really is a way to handle our stuff. And that's such a simplistic way to think about it. So if, as we're talking to business owners, right, why is it relevant to a business owner? Is because hopefully you've got some stuff, okay? Or you're building to have some stuff. And I don't mean to oversimplistic, but that's what it is. Let's not complicate it. We don't have to use fancy language. If you've got stuff, if you got a house and you've got equity in your house, okay? If you've got stuff, and sorry, kids are stuff, right? Like if we think about our kids, right? They're not stuff. I get it. I'm being funny, but we want to make sure we protect them too, right? So if something happens to me and my wife, I want to make sure that the stuff that I put into my trust is there to also take care of my kids in the event that I can't do that, right? So there's just so much that goes into the trust. Business owners, you're building your practice, you're building whatever you're building. Maybe you don't have what you want yet, but you have shares or ownership interest in your company that you're building. And I'll tell you this, Gil, I find this so often. This is very relevant for the audience today. So many business persons are so good at making money very, very quickly. I mean, there's a lot that are not, okay? But there's so many business persons that I've met that have been really good at making money very quickly, but they have the syndrome of the successful business person, meaning they're just go, go, go. They're making. And by the time they sit down to look back, they realize that they have nothing in order. Everything is a hot and complete mess, right? That's many business persons, right? Thank God for those people, because that means you and I have a job. Right? But the fact of the matter is we want to avoid growing so far so fast without having things in order, because the smallest thing happens, and then it's like the house of cards, right? The whole thing can fall down. So I always tell people, make sure you're putting things in order along the way, because your stuff, even if you think you don't have anything, you might wake up tomorrow and have a bunch and nothing is in order. And God forbid the unexpected happens, right? Yep. You want to make sure you're taken care of, period. I don't know if I said too much, Gil, but...
No. I mean, the best way to explain this are in very simplistic terms, and you've done a great job of that. There's a few... I'm going to ask you some questions that typically come up. Maybe they're like myths, or people don't really realize how it works. So here's one question I hear often. Gil, with this trust thing, do I have to register this in like the division of corporations or something like that? Or how does that work? So what would be your answer to that?
Well, the answer is no. The trust is something that's private. It maintains and keeps its privacy. Nobody needs to know your business. That's the cool part about a trust, right? It's completely private. Whatever you decide, whoever you want to leave stuff to, or whoever you don't want to leave stuff to, right? That's private. Nobody's going to know about that. Now, there are certain circumstances where certain provisions of the trust might need to be made public. For example, if you have real property that is owned by the trust, there might be a provision that needs to be recorded on the public records stating that you have authority to actually sell the property within the trust. But those are very limited circumstances. So to concisely answer that point, a trust is private. It does not have to be registered anywhere on the public records.
Excellent. So it's confidential to the extent to where the client wants to keep it confidential. Is
exactly.
That correct? Okay.
Exactly. Keep your business to yourself or tell your business to the world. That's on you.
So question 2, which you partially answered, which is a question that comes up is, do I have to record my trust agreement with the clerk of court? Like the way, you record a deed. Do you have to record a trust agreement or not?
So you don't have to record a trust agreement outright. Like you don't have to make it a public record. But again, because of certain circumstances, maybe because of certain transactions, typically a portion of the trust would get recorded. So let's say somebody has a 50-page trust or whatever, right? And they don't want the whole thing in the public records. We typically would take out the pages that matter to the transaction we are handling, attach that to an affidavit, and record that. And that would suffice. We don't have to record the entire trust. You can if you want to, but again, typically it's a private thing, confidential. You don't want the world knowing your business like that.
Perfect. That's great. The other question that comes up as well, is there a limit as to how many times you can amend or change or revise the trust agreement once it's been executed or signed?
If it's a revocable trust, there is no limit. Okay. I mean, obviously, if you're dealing with any professional, whether that's us or anybody, right? Somebody who does the trust, they're going to charge you for the amendments. So maybe if there's a limit, it's your budget, whatever that budget is, right? But you can change as much as you want, so long as you are still mentally sound and able to make those decisions. The second that you are no longer able, and what we would call in our world, that you no longer have the legal capacity to make decisions, then you can't amend it anymore. Then it becomes set in stone.
Perfect. The other question becomes, what other documents or not kind of accompany the trust agreement? Maybe some POAs, things like that. Are there any documents that you recommend that should be also drafted in conjunction with when you're forming the trust?
100%. I like to call it, you have to have this basic care package, okay? The trust is going to handle your stuff, but then you need a basic care package to handle your person, right? Your own you, okay? And so there's always several documents that I recommend. One, I recommend financial powers of attorney, specifically something called a durable power of attorney. The durable power of attorney, what that means is that even if you, let's say, have an illness or have an accident and mentally are no longer around, okay, the durable power of attorney, it withstands any lack of legal capacity. So if I were not all there mentally, whoever I gave that power to can still act on my behalf. Typically, that wouldn't be the case if it was not durable. So we call that a financial power of attorney. Medical power of attorneys, access to medical records are all documents you want as well. Something called a living will is something you want. What are all these documents? Simply, they are outlines or directives to let your loved ones know what your decisions are with regards to your health care. So, for example, let's say, both you and I, Gil, we're married. So our wives legally have the power to make medical decisions on our behalf. Okay. But my oldest daughter, she's 20 years old. Although she lives at home with me and her mother, the reality is we don't have the legal authority over her life anymore because she's technically an adult. So in her case, she would need somebody to have a medical power of attorney to be able to make medical decisions on her behalf. And that goes just the same if somebody is, let's say, divorced and in their 50s or 60s, right? Or somebody is, a widow or a widower. That's why we want those documents, because there's no, although there's logical people to make those decisions, there's no legal authority without it being in writing. So we want medical powers of attorney. Anybody who has a medical power for us, we need to make sure they have access to medical records. We have to make sure that they're getting, HIPAA compliance, right? Not only that, what if it's the last days and we're literally, making decisions to keep us in this world or not keep us in this world, right? We want the living wills, which call advanced healthcare directives, to say, listen, if there is no more meaningful life in me and the machines are keeping me alive artificially, unplug, let me go in peace, right? These are directives that are important because we've heard stories of people who for 7 years have been mentally, physically dead for all intents and purposes, but the machines kept them alive. And so now you've got loved ones that are holding on forever. Nothing's changing. And now they have horrible medical bills and they've gone through everything and, just really bad scenarios when people don't put their decisions out there for their loved ones to follow. So all those documents, kind of go together when we talk about doing an estate planning. There's a phrase we use, and it's kind of like when we put together a plan for somebody, we like to put together a well-packed suitcase for a lifelong trip around the world. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're going to face. But hopefully we've got something stuck in the suitcase that'll help us get to where we need to go.
I love that. Love that. Great analogy. And now as we're kind of approaching the end, a few more questions. And one thing that you mentioned about loved ones or cases where there have been 7 years, a case that we all, at least people, kind of in our age group or older, will always remember the Terry Schiavo case.
Exactly what I was talking about. Yep.
We had to, we learned about that in law school. And I think that case, it happened here in Florida. I believe that case really gave a lot of awareness to the public at large as to the importance of having, these documents, these healthcare directives, as you said, so things like that don't occur. So exactly. Very important for everybody who's out there to make sure that they all have this. And this is something that the husband and the wife should have. It's not like one for everybody, but each individually, correct?
Absolutely. So in a married couple situation, typically we're going to recommend a married couples trust, okay, because there's benefits there. But if you're not married, you don't need to be married to have a trust. You can have an individual trust set up, or even something that we see very often now, obviously mixed families, right? People who are either in second marriages or third or fourth marriages, doesn't matter, but that are in other marriages and they're bringing stuff to the table, right? You got, the spouses, they're coming together, they're getting married, but each one of them had a life before. Maybe they have kids, maybe they have significant assets. And when they come together, they might want to say, listen, what I built with in my prior life, so to speak, I want that to go to my kids. And this spouse, what they built in their prior life, they want it to go to their kids. Well, the best way to do that is a trust, because if they start putting together their assets and start developing a new life with their assets jointly, all of a sudden things get, mucked up a little bit because it just gets merged and all put together in the same bucket. So when one passes, you can have unintended consequences with the family, and you might have your own kids getting left out of an inheritance that you intended to leave them. So that's one of the things that I see a lot nowadays, right? People, let's face it, life throws at us curveballs, right? And we find ourselves in second marriages. And if that's the case, make sure you're planning ahead, especially if you've got some stuff. Okay, if you don't have anything, fine, I get it. But if you're listening to this, you probably have some stuff, right? And so if you're in a second or third relationship, okay, or just, restarting your second chance relationship, make sure you do things the right way and protect your kids from the prior relationship and just, outline your future with your new relationship.
Excellent. And so I think this might be the final question. I want to give you this hypothetical. You have business owner, because this happens a lot when they're consulting with me, and they come in and say, Gil, I want to trust I own, two businesses. I've got my primary home, and I have two investment properties. I want to get this trust. And what happens after I sign this trust? Like, do all these assets under my personal name stay under my personal name, or do they get transferred to this trust? Like, how does that whole thing work? So, with that teed up, how do you approach that fact pattern?
So, that fact pattern is a very intricate fact pattern that I can break down a couple ways, but I'll mention it this way. If you were to come to me with that scenario, I would look at, okay, are your businesses properly organized and structured so that you have maximum liability protection, right? In other words, are your business activities logically separated sufficiently that they're under their own umbrella pillars, right? Are they under a separate LLC or separate incs? Are your properties that you have, your investment properties, covered under an LLC and properly protected with the business protections, the legal protections, okay? Because we might have to restructure some assets. Once we've done the legal analysis, we'll discuss the tax implications of whatever's going on. And then we're going to talk about the estate planning assets and the options that are available, right? So now we've got the structure set up. We've got the diagram. We'll draw a nice picture and with stick figures at the top because I'm not a graphic designer. Okay, but we'll have this structure in order: assets, legal protections, the idea of the trust at top, and then the person on top of that. But then the question is, once we've done all the paperwork, we've got it all done, we have to go back to the analogy of the bucket. If we think of the trust as the bucket, and if we think of, like, let's say this pen as the assets, until this pen makes itself to the bucket, that whole trust plan is worthless. So there's something that we call funding. Funding is what you think. It's like putting money into something. So if I've got assets and I've got stocks in my business, or if I've got membership interests in my LLC, I need to assign those assets, those interests, those stocks, those properties, the bank accounts, life insurance, any type of asset that I have, I need to insure that over to the trust. That's called funding the trust. At the end of the day, we want everything into the bucket of the trust. Anything that's left out has to go to the court process. So you cannot, and it's funny, recently situation, a client of mine, multimillionaire, done very, very well for himself, paid, had a whole estate plan done. They never signed it. A year, it just wasn't signed. They didn't do it with me. They did it with somebody else. They came to me and said, listen, I got to get this right. What do I do here? I said, well, let's start with signing it. That's the first step, right? And then after we've signed it, now we have to take all the assets and point them back to the trust. Okay. And so what was the problem there? The syndrome of the successful business person. They went so fast, so far, that they looked back and said, oh my gosh, like, I got to get some stuff in order. So to your concise question, what happens if we've got these assets and we have the trust? We have to put the assets into the trust. Otherwise, it's worthless.
You just booked, you get a book award now. Okay. That's right. So congratulations. I'll send that over to you, but that's perfect. That is such a concise explanation. And I know that's very valuable because, people try to go online and kind of figure all this out. There's information all over the place. So you really provided a concise, thorough explanation of that. So thank you very much for that. And now we're finally getting to the close. We're actually over an hour. I knew that we were going to take a lot more time. You're just an awesome individual, great attorney. And I want to finish.
Shucks.
I want to finish with two last things. Number one, and I'll let you handle this in order. I want you to provide kind of the last kind of suggestions regarding estate planning, or maybe you can tie that in with how can people contact you, which they can contact me and I'll send it over to you. In full disclosure, everybody, anybody who's asking for estate plan, I refer that 100% over to your law firm, and everybody who's been there just absolutely loves that. You have a 5-star review in Google with over 100 reviews, which as an attorney is great. So congratulations. I can personally attest to your character and you as a lawyer as well. So if you want to give kind of a plug-in for your firm, last thoughts for estate planning, and then you can finally end it with the spiritual aspect, because you are a pastor. You got to give a quick plug on that. We've had some great discussions on that. And I can tell you that my spirituality really guides my entire life, how I handle the firm and how I view things. And you've been great. And I've always found you as a source of inspiration and also somebody I can count on to talk about these things. So, floor is yours, and you can bring it home.
All right, that's a lot to bring home, but thank you.
You can do it.
So yeah. So guys, the best way, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, with Gil and you're one of Gil's clients, man, go through his office because we set up a relationship that has been over 20 years in the making to be able to really handle and take care of our clients. So I'm referring my litigation stuff to Gil's office. He's referring his estate planning to my office because we do really believe in each other and the quality of service that we offer to each other, not just in a legal aspect, but as humans, as beings, as people understanding real life situations. So I'd say that, if you're following this on social media, hey, contact us direct. I don't have to send a referral to Gil, whatever. Same thing with Gil, but I love him. Maybe send it to him anyway. But the reality is that I would say this on the estate planning side. Don't wait until it's too late. That's what people do. They wait until it's way too late. I had somebody who came up to me and says, JJ, I need to sit down. I got to do my plan. I'm like, cool, call the office. Well, he finally called the office 2 months ago. The problem is the first engagement was 15 years ago. And the wife sat down with me in the meeting and says, I thought you were going to die before we got here because the husband had 3 incidences during that 15-year time frame. So like, guys, don't wait for it, right? Invest now because again, you're going to keep doing better, but you don't want to look back and say, I wish I should have done this, or God forbid something happens and now you're stuck and you can't take action. You mentioned something earlier, Gil, the person who comes to you and say, hey, I have to do an estate plan now because I just got sued. Guess what? Too late. Too late. There's a look back period. They can call back your assets. So do it now, invest now. The investment that you'll put into it now will be much, much better than the cost and the time lost for not having planned properly, right? So that I think that would be my suggestion as it relates to the estate plan. It will help you get the structure right. Don't worry about that. But if you don't do anything, it doesn't matter, right? So get on that now. How do people contact us? Again, either through Gil's office or check us out at jjplegal.com. That's that address right up there. If it's not too small, jjplegal.com. Get some information from us there. And then lastly, we mentioned it, and I don't know how this relates necessarily, but yeah, I am a pastor, right? One of my callings in life is to preach the message of Jesus Christ. Quite simply, I'm a pastor of the Christian denomination, non-denominational, just evangelical Christian, like the Bible guy. That's it. That's all it is, right? That is something much like your faith, Gil, that literally governs all that we do. It's not a piece of our pie. It's the whole pie, right? It's the whole pie, and the ingredients in that pie are everything that we do. How we serve people, how we love people, how we help people. That's just all part of the pie. It's all governed by what God's usefulness, right? I truly firmly believe that the better we serve people, the more we're calling out our calling, the more we're living out our calling, right? The better we serve people, the better product we offer is really the root at our heart to serve people, right? And that's why I love estate planning so much, because it's a practical thing that people really need help with, okay? I'm not just selling them a service to sell them a service. I'm selling them something that they actually need. The problem is most people just don't know they need it, right? So that helps us to live out the teaching aspect. We get to train people what they need to be able to protect the ones that they love most and themselves in the event that they find themselves in a situation. So I guess I would say on that front, know that that's our heart, right? If you're watching this, that's our heart to help you guys out. And we look forward to helping you guys out how much and however which way we can.
Great. Well, thank you, Attorney JJ Perez, Juan Jorge Perez, ending with that incredible faith-driven message. We feel the same way here at the firm at BlackRock. And we certainly appreciate everything that you have done for the people that we've referred. Your staff also incredibly helpful. They're on it. So please tell them that everybody here at the firm appreciate that. And thank you for your time. Almost over an hour. super engaging. I know that everybody who's going to be watching is going to definitely learn a lot and be contacting your office as well. So with that said, thank you very much, JJ. I appreciate it. I love you. Blessings to you and your family and your firm and all your clients. And for everybody else who is watching next month, stay tuned. We have, again, on September the 30th, we have our September Be Smart podcast with Evelyn Perez Verdia. Well, she will be discussing public relations. Excellent story that she has as well. We'll dive in deep like we did with Attorney Perez today, and then get into her experience with public relations and applying it to your business. So thank you very much. God bless, and we'll talk soon.
Take care, brother. Love you, man.
You too, brother. Take care. Bye-bye.